Alright, so much earlier on this channel, I made some videos about Mgtow, and I actually took one of them down and made it private because I felt like it was a little too harsh. Because it was directed at all the people who came onto the first video, basically calling me a bunch of, white pill, whatever, these names. Um, which is, just a indication of how fragile this stuff really is and where it actually comes from. But I ended up taking that video down because I felt like my response was, basically either calling these guys black-pilled virgins or 40-year-old dudes in a failed marriage on copium. Perhaps that was a little harsh, and I said more than that and basically called these guys hopeless, which I think they're not hopeless, but I do think that in many ways that's what they desire to be. But I think I may have misjudged the problem of Mgtow a little bit, because if you look at what a lot of these manosphere guys do, right? They're the influencers in this sphere of what I basically have been calling male radical feminism. Is there's different kinds. Some of them are blatantly encouraging people not to seek relationships with women. Some of them are urging men to be very careful in their relationships with women. There are terms like divorce rape. There are terms like, they use a lot of the same words as radical feminism. They just spin a little bit. Like radical feminists have the rape culture term. These guys have divorce rape culture. These guys have what's it called? The no fault divorce culture, whatever it is. There's they just have these. I've even heard them talk about the matriarchy or a gynocentric society, which is a direct mirror of the radical feminist term patriarchy. It's just an oversimplification of the way things actually are. But my initial stance on this was that it was cowardice, and to some extent I still think it is. But I think in order to really understand this phenomenon, both radical feminism and Mgtow shit, basically like radical male-centric, like androcentric shit, you have to understand the mechanism that it uses to both shield itself and propagate itself, and also defend the people who are subservient to that ideology. So one of the biggest things with Mgtow is statistics. And these people, they love statistics. You would think these guys are like mathematicians, how much they throw numbers around. And if you go back to my video on numeracy versus literacy, you'll hear me say that in the absence of logic, whatever can be rationalized is perceived as truth. In the absence of mathematical thinking, whatever can be argued for is truth. And because arguments, you can argue very eloquently for some bullshit. And if you argue and most of the time your arguments are coming from a place of emotion. They're not coming, it's not like you had an objective vision of the way things were and decided to make a propositional reductionist proof about it. These things aren't equations. They have their emotional significance, their emotional weight that pushes them forward, because there's an infinite amount of facts, but there's only a certain number of facts that you care about. So generally, in my experience, what happens with these guys is that they have a disappointing experience with a woman. or maybe several, or maybe they're disappointed at their lack of experience. Or maybe a disappointing experience happens to somebody they know. Like, for instance, you always hear Rollo Tomasi talk about how he's married. It's like, okay, but what you don't hear is that he knew people who committed suicide from getting divorced. So that's why he's on this crusade. It's not because, like, people always say, I thought something bad happened to him, which is why he's so vehement, but it was actually something bad happened to his friend. So it doesn't have to be personal. But for whatever reason, they fall into this perception that women are dangerous. That's the main perception, is that women are something to be afraid of. And to some extent, that's true. But it's not a sophisticated understanding of the problem. I mean, women are humans, and humans are the world's deadliest animal. And we're deadly not because of our strength, but because of our mind. And women, in many ways, specialize in using the mind to destroy reputation. This is true. Just look at the Johnny Depp Amber Heard trial, among other things. Look at middle school girl bullies, using social media, whatever. But, so yes, in a way, you should be afraid. But also, the negativity of your reaction, your unconscious reaction, your perception, the taintedness of your perception is going to bring the worst out of people. Because the cure to dealing with somebody who is... Everybody's potentially malevolent, and the cure to dealing with somebody that's potentially malevolent is to have them on your side. You don't want somebody who's harmless. Like, you hear a lot of these guys say this too. They'll say, oh, why can't women be traditional again? Why can't women be subservient again? Why can't women be, housewives in the little maid outfit again? I just want women to be feminine again. You hear that all the time with these guys. Why is that? It's because a traditional, subservient, feminine person isn't going to rip your heart out and shit on it. And that's what these guys are afraid of. So, because your statistics that you're pulling out of the environment are going to be radically influenced by your emotion, what exactly is happening when these guys are seeing bad things happen to guys around them from dealing with women, seeing reputation get destroyed, seeing the Johnny Depp Amber Heard trial? What is happening to the statistics they're using? They're pulling statistics out for what purpose? It's for self-protection. Because it's for the same reason that they want women to be feminine again, to be traditional, to be domestic, insert meek word here. Because they don't want to be confronted with the reality that this is another person. That person is a human being. Human beings are the most dangerous creatures on the planet because of our mind. They don't want to be confronted with that reality. It's much easier to say, well, you're not domestic, you're not feminine, you're not weak, therefore you're a threat to me, to my emotions, and therefore I don't want to deal with you. You hear them say this too. Feminism ruined women. Ruined women for who? For them, clearly. But what is the underlying justification for that is that if you make people strong, then they have options. And if they have options, then they can leave. And if they leave, you want to die because these guys are fragile. These guys are weak in many ways. And these guys have low self-esteem. And the easiest way to fix a low self-esteem situation, if you have attachment issues, the easiest way to protect yourself against the results of attachment issues is to have a person who is never going to leave. Why? Because she's feminine, she's domestic, she's dependent. But these guys also say women don't want to work. So which is it? I guess this is going over 10 minutes. So I guess what it boils down to is that these statistics are a method of self-protection. The acting unlovable is a method of self-protection. The contradictions, the contradictory expectations, the over-high expectations, raising of your expectations to unreasonable standards is a method of self-protection. If you make yourself unlovable, if you set your expectations extraordinarily high, if you use statistics to justify why you'll always be alone, why it's dangerous, too dangerous to ever consider dating a woman, then you never have to expose yourself. You never have to feel obligated because you know it's a fool's errand. You've convinced yourself that it's a fool's errand. And the more you do that, the less you have to try. And the more you can blame society and feminism and women for making them able to have a spine and give them options. Because again, if people have options and you don't think of yourself as very much, why would anybody choose you? So the root of this is not statistics. The root of this shit is not feminism. The root of this is not... It's just that these guys have low self-esteem. They don't want a person with options because they feel like if a woman has options, she will choose someone else. Because they think of themselves as mud. And the statistics, it's too dangerous, I'm unlovable, here's 50% of all relationships end in divorce, etc., self-protection. If you don't have to try, you don't have to fail. And if you don't fail, you don't reconfirm that this system is broken. You don't make that hopelessness upon yourself. You don't hate yourself because you've never tried, you've never failed, and you can keep protecting yourself, keeping your distance from the situation, from the source of potential pain that you view as inevitable, so you never even have to try. So that's the true extent of the cowardice behind Mgtow.